I mean, I'll start with Spirited Away. I know I'm getting a little bit out of order, but I already did start talking a little bit about Joe Hisaishi's work in that film. And like I said, it's not my favorite Ghibli film. And to be honest, it might not even be the score from Joe Hisaishi I listen to the most. That might be Princess Mononoke, if I'm being honest. And I think it's just
Yeah,
because of that
love that
main
one.
theme.
Yeah, yeah, so
But,
good.
I sort of alluded to this when talking about something like Raiders of the Lost Ark, which we'll obviously talk about when we get to Ryan's region. But
Yeah.
there's something about Spirited Away and how consistent that it is, and how each individual melody it actually feels like a soundtrack when you think about it. Like each
Hmm.
component feels like its own separate song. Like they have this melodic propulsion to it, and I love musical scores that almost operate like a soundtrack without literally being a soundtrack. You can add words and lyrics to the entire experience of Spirited Away, and it feels like an album. And that's one of the things I really appreciate about it. And I think Hisaishi's use of it's not really chordal dissonance, but he operates like a jazz musician without really playing jazz music. There are some really tricky things he's doing compositionally that I just absolutely respect, and no one is doing anything like him. So Spirited Away, I think, might be the best musical experience from Ghibli, even if it's not my favorite film from that lovely studio. And of
Yeah.
course, with Vertigo from 1958, I mentioned how Bernard Herrmann's music there, you can't listen to it without feeling some sense of like anxiety.
No.
Yeah.
And it's not even just that. They're like the opening credits alone. It's almost
The
piercing.
opening track is incredible.
It's so
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, but it's kind of melodic. Like there are a couple love themes sprinkled throughout the film that are actually like kind of romantic, which is this weird counterbalance for what the film actually is and how ahead of its time it is. That's a film that apparently people didn't like when it first came out, and I think part of the reason why could be the music and just how piercing that it literally is. So
Mhm.
I just absolutely respect the hell out of that score for being as abrasive and ahead of its time that it is. Of course, E.T. the Extraterrestrial by John Williams. I
Mm.
mean, it's iconic for all the reasons we talked about. It's also iconic for being one of the most uniquely designed scores in its final act by editing itself into the movie in a very different way than most often. Most often, composers compose and edit and create music over a finished product, whereas E.T. sort of went the other direction. The film in its climax was edited around John Williams' score because the melody and the phrasing of it was just that good. And that's another thing we talk about. It's not just the melodies themselves and how they're performed, but the phrasing and when pauses are put in. And there's something about John Williams' work there that is it requires those specific moments to breathe. Not just the fact that there are moments that breathe, it's the moments that he chooses to pause the music and let things simmer. And the movie
Mhm.
had to react to that, which is so, so interesting.
Yeah.
Lastly, Blade Runner, Vangelis. Part of the reason why I picked this one, it's also very varied. There's a lot of
Mhm.
variety in this score. There's some lovely themes that are very film noir in many ways, which certainly match the influence that the film is going for. But from a synthesizer standpoint, it's so ahead of its time when you hear what that film is doing, and you think, oh man, if young audiences watch this now, they might be thinking this sounds like Uncut Gems or this sounds like Good Time. It just
Yeah.
we're hearing almost like this resurgence of what Vangelis was doing in movies like Blade Runner. It's becoming a very common like indie thriller kind of thing. So Blade Runner, I think, is a very influential score for those reasons. So yep, those are my four. And that's why I picked them.
Yeah. I mentioned earlier that there are scores that you guys picked that if I was considering a true Mount Rushmore for me, there would be some crossover, and Blade Runner is one of those for me.
Would you have picked?
That's a
Would you have
score
picked it if
that's
I didn't get to
Yeah.
it first?
probably, yeah. But I would
I probably
intentionally
would've
let you
too.
guys go first because I wanted to sift through, and I had plenty of other options. I mean, the four I'm going
That's
to
the
talk
thing.
about, I love. So
Yeah, that's the
you
thing.
know,
It's not like we're running out of options if someone goes first and takes
yeah,
something that you want. It's like I almost
no,
picked How to Train Your Dragon, JD, and then I knew
yeah.
he's gonna take that one. I'll let him have it.
I mean, I let you guys have your say. I wanted to be able to look at what you guys picked and then kind of go from there. But Blade Runner is certainly one of those scores for me, and I love how immersive it is. You know, the music, there's something about its soft qualities. And again, I'll reiterate, as I noted in my Steve Jablonsky piece, I am not a musician. I don't know the technical jargon. I don't know anything
That's
about
true.
music
We should just
theory.
go with Brenda's
I
picks.
cannot articulate it.
I'll just pick the winners. I'll just pick them all.
Yeah, exactly.
Good night, everyone. Please rate, review, subscribe down
See you
below.
guys.
You're listening on iTunes. Give us a review.
Nah, the Fender Precision bass here is just for show. I don't know what I'm doing with it.
Yeah. But look, I'll reiterate that. All
Actually,
I can
mine.
speak to is how it works for me, you know, as
Yeah.
a layman. And I think that, you know, like the somber, soft qualities of that score, I think are really great. And I think what's fascinating about the soundtrack when you listen to it on Spotify is that the dialogue accompanies a lot of the music. And so you get a really great
Yeah, it is kind of a narrative. Score
it
in
is
many ways.
like, yeah, I love that. I love that the soundtrack is composed that way. So while yes, you get to listen to a lot of the music separately from the dialogue, but you really get to also experience how that music, which is great on its own, how it just works so seamlessly for how that film is written, and then
Yeah.
you consider the aesthetics of it and just what that film is doing tonally, and it's impeccable. It's absolutely fantastic. And you know, that final track is probably top 10 for me all time.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's great.
Tears
And,
in
and
the
I
Rain. Yeah.
and I will say, you bring up an interesting point there, which is there are some scores that work really well in the film, but not really when you listen to them devoid of the actual narrative itself, and vice versa as well, where
Yeah.
Sure.
like I think of the score for The Last of the Mohicans, which I think is a great score, but I think it kind of overwhelms the movie.
That's
like
fair.
Listening to it on its own, I think it's fantastic. And then there's something like Dunkirk, which I don't really think is a great score to listen to on its own, but it works so well in the movie. So
Yeah.
that's a really interesting point that you made there.